What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Okay, so I lost electricity all day, all afternoon, right after the Nick Cook interview. The second interview that I was going to do, fortunately, the person who I'm interviewing had to change it for tomorrow last minute. So I was grateful for that because I lost power not long after I realized that this person wasn't going to be on today. So tomorrow I'm going to be interviewing this person, and I have a very special returning guest also. More interviews recently because I've been getting really cool reactions from you because the interviews I really have a lot of fun speaking to everybody. So I'm guessing you guys really like them. Honestly, I don't mind about the numbers. The interviews are not the pieces of content that give me the most numbers, but they are the pieces of content that I enjoy the most doing. I also love doing news quite a bit, as you guys know, but I do enjoy a good conversation. That's like key. So you're going to start seeing a little more interviews in the coming months. And then I'm going to just switch it up a bit and just keep it organic. That's the plan. That's that. For today's video, this is a really important topic to me because I grew up in a household of medical professionals. My father is a surgeon, my mother is an OBG. So I grew up with a certain level of stigma over things that cannot be explained with the scientific method. And for the longest time, especially with my dad and my brother, who are like very mainstream scientists, like my dad has patents and everything, So, but my mother was a little more flexible despite being a medical professional as well. She was the one who taught me a lot of what I know today about psi phenomena and all that type of stuff. But given that upbringing that I had, it really excites me to see medical professionals who I know have had really weird experiences and anomalous experiences throughout their lives, and they're afraid to come forward because of the stigma and because of the ridicule and because of the attacks. Especially these days with the internet, there are many faceless trolls who go on the attack of people who are like being brave and telling you what they experienced. And I know that some of that is by design. The thing is, though, that for me, people who come after these brave individuals and do it because they have an agenda, that triggers a lot of other people who are already skeptical, and they jump on the bandwagon attacking these brave people. And I just don't like that. I think that's completely unfair. So, in light of that, I do want to highlight a video that James Fox just released on his X account about Dr. Italo, the doctor who last week went on the reality check show in a video that James Fox provided to Ross Coulthard, talking about his contact with the being from the Varginha UFO crash. There's a lot more information with that. In that same interview, James Fox talked about the tapes that Dr. Lear gave him. These tapes are from the Varginha case. There's a meeting between many medical professionals from the Humanitas Hospital, and they go into detail about what happened and an alleged telepathic communication. The thing is that Dr. Italo was not really talking about this, and this really surprised a lot of people from his town. And I got a really interesting comment from somebody who claims to live in Virginia, which I'm going to read to you right now. So this lady says, "Wow, I live in Virginia. I worked with Dr. Italo for over 5 years, and this was never mentioned at the hospital. It's strange that in other videos he said he didn't see it, that he saw a video of Dr. Marcos Vinicius, who I also worked with, and he never said anything about it. And Dr. Marcos Vinicius was very talkative. My God, I'm really surprised to hear this." And that final part of the message says, "Dr. Italo is one of the best doctors in the city." And then I responded with this. I said, that's incredible to hear your perspective as someone who worked with them directly. And then she said, yes, and I'm still in contact with Dr. Italo to this day. He's an excellent person. I truly believe that at the time, he couldn't say much. This story caused quite a stir in the city. This is true. So now, based on the reaction from that interview, apparently the good doctor has been attacked by a lot of people. And this is just a PSA to remind you that if you're not part of the people with an agenda that come after whistleblowers and witnesses, and you engage in this kind of behavior, just understand if you're really after truth, you want for these people to testify. And if they're lying, they will be uncovered to be lying. But if they're not, this is one of the biggest stories in human history. That is a reality of it. So, with that said, let's play the video of James Fox, and he's going to play a snippet from his interview with Dr. Italo. This is going to be a subtitled video, so be warned. This is what James Fox said. Head neurosurgeon Dr. Italo at Regional Hospital in Virginia, Brazil, responds to criticism regarding his claims of direct contact with a live alien in captivity in 1996. Here it is.
This is James Fox with a quick update. I'm about to post a recent interview I did with neurosurgeon Dr. Italo just a few weeks ago. I'm just going to post a few snippets. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that whether you believe him or you don't believe him, this man has dedicated his life to making other people's lives better, helping other people. He's one of the most caring, compassionate individuals I've ever met. So just remember to be kind, be compassionate. There's everything to lose and nothing to gain by coming forward. We are working with good people within the U.S. government to protect him. And if any Brazilian military people out there are thinking about paying him a visit, I will dedicate my life to exposing that. So again, this gentleman deserves our support and care and kindness. Thank you. These statements of most extraordinary statements I've ever heard in my career. How would he respond to those skeptics that are thinking that he's crazy with what he's saying? Like, is he concerned about the consequences?
Tem pessoas que na internet agridem, falam que a gente é louco, que a gente quer aparecer, que a gente quer dinheiro, que a gente quer... Por que falou agora? Porque agora dá, né? Quando vocês começaram a conversar comigo, uma bela hora com ele, eu resolvi falar. Falei, deixa eu falar, se der problema, deu. Se eu falasse na época, neuro já é meio doido, né? Cuida de louco, né? Se eu começasse a falar tudo o que eu estava pensando, tudo que eu era diretor dos 3 hospitais. Eu fui diretor dos 3.
Regional,
Humanitas e Bom Pastor. Então a gente se reservava um pouco mais, né? Mas depois eu adoeci, tive câncer de próstata, melhorei. E quando vocês chegaram com vocês, eu tive confiança de falar. Era um alien. Um alien, sem dúvida.
No question.
No question. Eu não pedi para ver, deixa eu ver. Achei interessante, mas na hora eu não tinha entendido toda a repercussão que daria. Eu olhei de novo com atenção, mas eu olhei com o olhar médico, não com o olhar sociológico. Ele olhou sem julgamento. Isso que é uma coisa bonita. Eu olhei para ele sem julgamento, ele olhou para mim sem julgamento. Foi uma empatia. Simpatia, empatia. Você pode acreditar, pode não acreditar, mas para mim foi muito importante ver, porque eu vi a imensidão que tem esse universo, né? Não somos só nós aqui, nesse mundo tão maravilhoso, mas deve existir muitos outros, e aquele ser que estava ali é prova disso.
That is wild. Kudos to James Fox for this one, man. This is really something. I do want to point out, I can only imagine what I would go through and my family would go through if one of my parents was in one of those situations. So, yeah, you should listen to what James is saying here. Just be empathetic. Don't be a dick. And those who already have their agenda to do this, to go after people's livelihoods and to go after people's character, so be it. I mean, I get it. Some of them are doing their job. I get it. But if you're not part of that, just be respectful. It's not really that big of a deal. With that in mind, I do want to remind people of some of who I think are amongst the brave medical and scientific professionals who decided to come forward and talk about their experiences. And I'm going to go through 3 names that I think are very important. The very first name is going to be somebody who's fairly new to this whole scene, who is a scientist, and she was program director at the National Science Foundation. She worked with a lot of scientists. She has specific insight into a sea change that is starting to emerge amongst the scientific community of people who have experienced anomalous things and who have dealt with some of these materials, who are now being more brave and talking about this. I'm talking about Dr. Anna Brady-Estevez. And she is one of these people who are seeing stuff in the sky. And she would consider herself an experiencer. She is a scientist, but she's more on the funding side of science, which is also very important. But I do put her in that category of a scientist experiencer because she's open and she has shared a lot of the things that she's experienced. So this is her talking about this sea change in the scientific community.
Americans and people around the world are seeing this phenomena, and those that build things are saying, what do we build together? So we've seen these on a number of occasions. We've brought some high-ranking scientists down to folks who are able in spots where these show up more frequently. And it's worth noting that there are people, a number of groups of people who are currently pulling in or attracting craft, and other phenomena. And some people just happen to see them. I'm looking right at you, Ron. You saw a lot of these. But so there are people that have seen these infrequently. There are people who have seen these on a day-to-day basis. When we've spoken with scientists, over the past year or two, and so this is coming out of places that some would see as the scientific establishment. And can we talk about this? Can we not? And some of these conversations hadn't taken place as openly. When they did, what we found was, when we go into rooms and we talk with people who are innovators, it's usually 30 to 50% of people will share that they've seen or experienced anomalous phenomena. Sometimes they say, oh no, I haven't seen the UAP. And then they say, well, I did see this orb over a football field and, it was huge. And then, so people have seen things, and we've had to have the conversation with leaders in science where we say, by the way, times have changed. There's all this great work that's been done towards disclosure. And when we started talking to people about it, where we might have thought it was 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, it seems like it's more like 1 in 3 or 2 in 3 or maybe 3 in 3 and 3 people are talking about it. And so we've had the conversation, which is, it is not credible or viable to act like this isn't going on. So it's a little, we use the analogy that it's a little bit like whale watching. It's both normal if you live by the coast only, certainly. But if you live by the coast, you have access to get out of the water, there's a percentage of people who would have seen whales. There's a percentage who haven't. It's normal both ways. So nothing to feel like, special or not special, regardless, but it's ubiquitous. So if you can't go in front of a room of people, if you've seen that and if you haven't seen it, we say, listen, people are seeing this, they know. So to be credible, you do need to acknowledge it's out there. There's so much data. There's so much people have on their iPhones. There's so many people who will speak to the programs on the high side they're in, but the low side, is not waiting for agreement. They're not, the Fortune 1, the US government can lead this. We can try to figure out what benefit we have from the great work people in this country and perhaps around the world have done, or people are ready to move forward. And when I was in government, I used to receive proposals, without going into the details on any of them, in various fields of technology where people think they were the only ones doing it. No, Any idea you have, believe me, dozens of people are working at the same time. So this is something that right now, both in this country around the world, there are so many people that are eager to build this, and a number of them are already building these things out. So just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it isn't happening all over the place, both in this country and abroad. So if we need to lead, if we want to lead, we need to be active. So I'm looking, we always listen with respect to innovators and entrepreneurs. And I want to thank so many of you for sharing what you've seen. There is an opportunity. I expect more scientists are going to be engaging directly with the phenomena. And as scientists, they're going to be doing experiments and methods. Okay, so if you want to talk about something that people talk even less about than UAPs. So the thing that was even more of a third rail than UAPs is the sources and methods for some of this. So as you're hearing about, there's a number of teams that are working calling this phenomena, and they're talking about all these different things. Some of them have these, ultra exotic protocols. And then one of the groups that we went to visit with some scientists, their protocol was prayer. And it was not some exotic thing. It was the Our Father, the Hail Mary, conversation. And I'm not trying to constrain it to any denomination or any faith or lack thereof, because I think one of the hesitancies people have is they want this to be for everybody and not to be specific or linked with one thing. But source of the methods, when we're talking science, there are people through meditation or very, day by day prayer are calling in these crafts, and these orbs. So it's science. Let's talk about what it is and then assess it.
This will go down, I think, as one of the most important testimonies from a scientist about scientists who are experiencers. One of the very first times that it's being talked about in a public forum. And I think it will have a massive effect. And she wasn't the first one, though. I did want to show you this one because I thought it was a very powerful statement. I don't know if you guys agree, but there are others, and I will show you these others. Another one is, for me, one of the godfathers of ufology, who has been doing investigations into UFOs and phenomena in general for many decades. He worked alongside Dr. J. Allen Hynek in Project Blue Book, and he was one of the co-creators of the precursor of the internet. Of course, talking about Dr. Jacques Vallée, who in his books, in his work, he has pictured ufology's history in his Forbidden Science volumes, and one of the best analyses and interpretations of the phenomenon with his work in Passport to Magonia, Messengers of Deception, and The Invisible College. He wrote many more books, but he's one of them. Another one is John Keel, who were at the time kind of competing when they were publishing books to see who had the most accurate idea of what the phenomenon is. I think both of them deserve credit. Dr. Vallée didn't really talk about his own experiences when he was younger. Maybe there are some accounts of stuff he experienced, but I couldn't find many. And very recently, a few months ago, my buddy from Somewhere in the Skies, Ryan Sprague, had Dr. Jacques Vallée on his show. And Dr. Vallée opened up and he spoke about an entity that he encountered once. So I got to show you this. Shout out to Ryan from Somewhere in the Skies for this amazing clip that I think people need to check out more often.
There was another experience which is more recent, that I have not completely recovered from. I had continued to look at how parapsychology could be used to, frankly, to get to contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had spoken to people who had researched the same thing and to create the conditions where you could make something happen. And this was in San Francisco, not here in Paris. It was in San Francisco, and we did a number of structured environments that might be susceptible, and I talk about that in the book, might be susceptible to bringing that kind of experience of contact. And nothing much had happened. Vague impressions and so on. And then one night, I'm asleep. All of a sudden, I'm out of my body. Now, psychics describe going out of their body with a structured way and so on. And there are people who can apparently teach that. I had never taken those courses. I had spoken to them, Bob Monroe and others. I had met and I had discussed the process and so on. But this was not under my control. I mean, something had just taken me and moved me to a place in my apartment in San Francisco where I was in front of an entity. The entity was not threatening, but it was large. I thought of it as, frankly, as a living being in front of me, as tall as I am, with no particular features on it, but clearly ready to communicate. There was a sense of complete communication, but again, I was out of my body, so it wasn't going to be hearing or I was in that presence. I was very scared, even though it was not threatening, but I had never anticipated that. And I think I was so scared that projected me back in my body. My body woke up and I was in tears, and I was just completely surprised, by what had happened. There was no question I was asleep. My body was asleep the whole time. My mind wasn't. So it had essentially extracted me, to present that situation. Now, I write about that in the book. There was more, and obviously I want to explore it more, but I don't want to lead the reader into any theory about what happened because I don't understand what happened.
That's pretty wild. And I had never heard Dr. Vallée talking about this with such candor and so openly. Kudos to Ryan for getting this one. The other one and last one that I'm going to show you comes from a doctor who is an anthropologist who wrote two of the most important books about UFOs that exist. One of them is Identified Flying Objects, and the other one is the Extraterrestrial Model. I'm talking about Dr. Michael Masters. If you only know him by that, his work in that, you only know about half or less than half of what he has experienced because he's been very open about his experiences. And I consider him a really important figure in this story because of those experiences and because of that work that he did. So I'm just going to play you the clip from a podcast called Behind Greatness, where he talks about a telepathic intervention he had by the others and how it all played out. So here is Dr. Michael Masters on Behind Greatness talking about his experience.
I was just really burnt out, decided I was going to quit this particular area of research to focus on some other things. Just had that thought in my head. And then I was taken by an individual at a conference about 2 weeks after that, probably, up into an empty room at the conference hotel, who brought another person in, a man who the two knew each other, but they'd never met before face to face. But he comes into the room and then pulls a chair up really, really close to me. So his face is probably like 10 inches from mine, and looks at me in the eyes and calmed me down at first because I was kind of pissed about how close he was sitting. But then these others, as I've come to know them, said through him, we know you've been thinking about quitting lately, and we'd really prefer you didn't do that. And it, blew my mind wide open because I hadn't told anybody that. It was just a thought in my head that I'd had about 2 weeks before. And yeah, it from that point on, there was a lot of other things that took place. And eventually, as I've said before in a couple different places, eventually and slowly to the point where I hardly even noticed it, the entire conversation turned completely telepathic. So we weren't using our voices anymore, but I could still hear their voices, this woman and this man. And it wasn't them talking to me. They were being used as like a vessel of sorts. What I've come to understand is a form of trance mediumship. But they were brought to this place. They brought me up to this place and then had an intervention of sorts. They politely asked me if I would continue doing this for a while. They eventually told me they wanted to put 3 bits of information in my brain that would be important for some future events. Very politely asked me if I consented to that, explained exactly how it would happen, and then it happened exactly how they said it would. Just kind of blacked my eyes out and then force fed all of this information in the form of sort of colorful light into my brain, and also told me I wouldn't have access to it, asked me if that was okay as well, and I agreed to that. And that's been the case. I have no idea what it is. I can't access it, don't really want to access it because I don't want to know the future, especially because I get the sense that there's something coming. A lot of people who have experiences similar to this, and since I've started talking about this recently, so many people have reached out to me and described very, very similar things that have happened to them. And a lot of them have that same sense too, that it's in preparation for something. I don't claim to have any prophetic knowledge. In fact, I'm telling the opposite. I have no idea what it is they put in my brain, but I do get the sense that there's some reason, which is largely why there was an intervention in the first place, perhaps.
The reason that I show you this from other scientists and professionals is because, like Dr. Italo was brave enough to do this. I think that encouragement should be the option for people who are not involved in misinformation or counterintelligence. People who are brave enough to talk about this, you guys need to understand it's not easy because it sounds wild and it's really difficult to accept for a lot of people. And I'm not saying by any means that I completely believe what any of these people are telling me. I'm saying that they're brave enough to talk about something like this, knowing that most people would probably not believe them. What did they get out of it? So I don't know. It would be really cool if people understood how complicated of a situation it is when you're a medical professional risking their career, in some cases risking their tenure, how difficult it is for them to come forward and talk about these things and talk about these experiences. Me, who I'm just a journalist, I'm just a news guy, I have a hard time trying to talk about my experiences because of the stigma, because of how judgmental people are. And it's really disappointing. And I applaud James Fox for going out on a limb and vowing to protect Dr. Italo. Honestly, I'm going to start to do the same if I see anything. I will always try to be respectful, but I think that is complete bullshit because what we do need is more people with high credentials to come forward and reveal what they have experienced so we can get a little bit closer to what is actually going on. But that's just my opinion. I don't know what you guys think about it. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about Dr. Italo's statements here about what he is responding to critics who are after him? What do you think about the woman who worked with him, who wrote on the channel's comment section? And what do you think about all of these other scientists who were brave enough to talk about these experiences? Dr. Michael Masters, Dr. Jacques Vallée, There are others, of course. I just wanted to show you the ones that interest me the most for this video. And of course, what do you think about Dr. Anna Brady-Estevez talking about this sea change in the scientific establishment? People are coming forward and talking about this more often and more openly. That's good. But if we continue with this gut feeling sort of critique and offensive behavior, they're not going to come forward, and we're not going to find out what they have experienced. And trust me, it's a lot. So let me know what you think. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, hype, and hit the bell icon. That's all you need to know in order to help us, and it is what helps us the most. So thank you. But if you want to support us in other ways, there's a few links down there you can choose from. You can also become a member on YouTube, or you can support us through KGRA. Everything you choose to do is always appreciated. So thank you. And that's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive like Dr. Italo Venturelli. Always. Bye.